Internet, Johnny DL here again. This time I'm going to be reviewing Shadow Puppets, which is the next book in the Shadow series from Ender's Game. I think we left last time with um, China conquering India and a few other things happening. What else had happened? Oh, that was right. Petra was freed from captivity with a shield. So we move on from that, and it sort of jumps by maybe a couple of months, and um, Peter Wiggin gets a message from the Chinese saying that Ashiel's in prison and he's going to be here. And Peter decides, in his infinite wisdom, to go and rescue Ashiel, which, um, if you've read the first book, doesn't seem like a brilliant idea. Um, it, and it leads to all sorts of hassle. Um, we go from there to almost everybody abandoning Peter because, well, they all realise it's a stupid idea. Um, Ashiel is a dangerous sociopath, and Bean and Patra flee together, um, and Velomi flees to India, and Surya Wong, who is um, being second in command, takes over that job, and all hell breaks loose to a large degree. Um, the story then progresses on three different paths, really. There's the story of Ashiel, which we don't actually get to see an awful lot of compared to previous the previous books. Well, actually, strictly speaking, only really compared to Shadow of the Hegemon. He's only really touched upon in Ender's Shadow um, as a fleeting pass. But in Shadow of the Hegemon, he's a huge part of the book, and he appears as himself more a little bit more than this book. But his story of how he's in the hegemony headquarters um, is well played. It doesn't reveal too much, but it does certainly reveal enough of the plot to come if you know what you're looking for, which is brilliant as somebody who likes to reread books to find those little hidden things that are in there. Um, then you've got Bean and Patra, and Bean and Patra at the beginning of the book are, well, Bean saved her, and Patra's been um, imagining life with Patra all the time she was in captivity, and she's fallen in love with um, this idealized image of Bean, and is that idealized image is Bean himself as well. So she loves him, and it's her role in the story to get him to love her, which he eventually does. Um, and they talk about all sorts of things about um, having children together, and Bean reveals that he's got a genetic condition that he doesn't want to pass on to his children, and there's only one doctor in the world that can um, possibly help them, and that person is somebody that Ashiel has already contacted. Um, and there's some back and forth there with. Um, they decide to go for in vitro fertilization for conceiving the children and testing them to make sure that each and every one of them doesn't have the condition. And it and we don't find out an awful lot about the babies in this book. Um, but we do find out a lot about Bean and Petra's attitudes, and there's a lot of um, toing and froing over what's right and what's moral and where the line is drawn. And Bean is very eager to destroy babies, destroy the babies, destroy the embryos at the beginning. But after Ashiel attempts and succeeds in kidnapping um, the remaining embryos, you, Bean has this change of heart where he realises that the embryos are his and Petra's responsibility, even though they're only fertilised eggs. They're not um, gestating or even ready to gestate yet. Um, so you get to learn an awful lot about um, Catholicism in that way. They it moves on a bit, and we have a story that starts with um, a lie. And Alai is another battle school graduate who was in Enderjish, and he's in um, Damascus and the head of a combined Muslim army. And it's weird to actually see that the book unites Muslims, because there are so many factions within Islam at the moment. We don't see a way for them to unite, but the book actually has. I wouldn't say it's a suggestion, but a bit pretty good um, guaranteed method for a united Islam, and that is that the terror that we've got going on at the moment um, actually continued and continued and continued, because these books are set maybe 100 years in the future, and the events have now progressed to lots and lots of bitter fighting, and eventually a nuclear bomb being let off in um, Mecca, which is kind of a big deal, because if you let off a nuclear bomb in Mecca, that's quite a huge proportion of sacred or hallowed ground for a number of religions that are irradiated for a long time. Um, and you see that um, I think there's one line that is said by Valomi at one point in the book towards the end, that um, we shouldn't use nuclear weapons. The Muslim god Allah was burned out of his house, um, and turned his face away from his people because they used nuclear weapons, or something very similar. And it's a very good line um, in some ways, because although I don't believe in God personally, the people that do, they need to understand that where they're going with their pursuit, a lot of people are going to sort of feel that they've stepped over the mark and they're not chosen people anymore, because of the events of not the events, the actions that a few of the followers of the same religion um, choose to pursue. And that that's a very interesting dynamic, and we get to see the rise of Ali and how he goes from being a humble advisor to being caliph and the ruler of all of Islam, um, both spiritually and militarily. And it, th- their whole role throughout the book is to help to free India from China's grasp. And they have some very effective methods. Um, Meanwhile, there's the story of Valomi. Valomi, can't say her name properly. Um, and she is, having had her um, miraculous escape on a bridge. Um, she leaves the hegemony compound at the beginning of the book and travels India, and she tries to work out a way of hindering the Chinese, and she decides to build the Great Wall of India. Um, and it's rather clever, the fact that it's not really a wall to start off with. It's not even a, a pile of stones. It's just a line of stones across a road, and every time you walk past it, you don't walk past. You step over, and when you step over, you drop some stones. And if you do this enough, you can block roads very easily. Um, you toss a few stones on the pile, and the pile's a little bigger, and you have 1,000 people drop a few stones on the pile every day for a couple of weeks, and you don't just have a pile, you do have a wall. And um, it spreads across all of India, and it's called the Great Wall of India and the Flag of India and a number of other things, and it shows that through the actions of the people we can bring governments to a halt. If we don't give our support wholly to our government, we can stop them in their tracks very, very easily. Um, the governments have power because not because they're um, necessarily good people or necessarily intelligent, but they have power because we give it to them. We give it to them when we hold elections. We give it to them when we don't fight them when they do things that are wrong. We give it to them when we let the media control how we think. If each individual decided whether something was right or wrong, and we decided as a unity that things were right, the way we should continue our democracy, that's one thing, but actually the power resides in a few hundred politicians, another 1,000 aides, and 14 or 15 people in media. Because if it weren't, it, those are the people that decide what gets put on TV, what gets put in newspapers, what goes out on the radio, how much we see on the internet on certain sites, and those are the people that tell us what we should be thinking and tell us what we should be believing, and it doesn't help. It places a massive divide between the people with the power and the people who give them the power, and there shouldn't be one. We all know what's best for us, and we all know what's best for society as a whole, because we just extrapolate. We assume that what's good for us is good for everybody. Um, and a lot of people say that, these are the two ways that I see socialism and conservatism. You have a group of people that say, what's good for society as a whole benefits me. That's socialism. And then you have not capitalism, conservatism, which is what is good for me will do society good because I can put back. And the two the two ways of thinking aren't very different. They're not differences that can't be overcome, um, but they are differences that lead to extreme socialism, which is communism, and extreme conservatism, which is capitalism. And if you ever take something to the extremes, it's not going to work. You always have people who are capable of exploiting it. In capitalism, it's very obvious that the people that are going to exploit it are the ones that get rich or have money. And in communism, the people that are going to exploit it are the people at the top, are the people who have the power to distribute. Um, and those people just siphon off a little bit at a time, and all of a sudden, they have the wealth. Um, so, yeah, that's politics and how um, this book sort of touches on that. I would like to do a politics video. I don't think I'm going to do it tonight. Um, what else is there? Um, oh, towards the end of the story, I need to wrap up the story because we have. Well, Valomi manages to block off the roads and stop the Chinese, and she manages to blow up some bridges, and the Muslims finally do take India. And we go back to. And Peter Wiggin goes into space briefly, and on his return, um, Ashiel tries to blow him out of the sky with a ground to air missile. The ground to air missile actually hits a sort of fake plane, fake spacecraft. So rather than it being um, an atmospheric craft that's got pilots and everything, it's just a shell that Peter Wiggin pretends he's going down in, and as a result of this, the international fleet, the people who are in charge of outer space, and actually have the majority of the firepower of humanity, have permission to step in and stop a shield to some degree. And at the same point, a shield tries to weasel out of it by um, offering to return the embryos to Bean and Petra, and it all culminates in sort of a final battle, which is incredibly clever. It's set up right from the start of the book, and I really don't want to give away all the details because it's a fantastic giggle to listen to and probably to read um, every single time. Um, so I'm going to say yes, this definitely is a good read. Um, there are a couple of things that were said that are really, a couple of things that were mentioned in the book that were really, um, really insightful politically. They were really insightful socially. I mean, um, Ashiel and Peter have a meal where they sort of spat, um, and perfection is mentioned, and Peter says something along the lines of, um, "You can't do anything perfectly because being perfect provokes resentment, so therefore wouldn't be perfect." Um, and he assigns it to Buddha or the Dalai Lama or one person or another. And Ashiel tries to, um, well, does actually assign it to the Greeks. Um, I don't actually know where it comes from, but it's a really good quote. I've been saying it to a number of people recently, and just to, adding a name at the end of it with a question mark because I don't know who actually said it. But if it's Orson Scott Card, then all props to him. Um, so yeah, that's Shadow Puppet by Orson Scott Card. This book was actually better narrated because it didn't have all the jumpy bits of post production put into it. The hegemon wasn't said by the same person in every single line, and they got Ashil's name right every time. And I didn't get annoyed at all with the performance. So yeah, it's a very good performance of the book. I'm now coming up on 20 minutes, so I'm going to say comment, rate, subscribe. Click the links down in the description. Um, I am going to go and make another video immediately after this, if not two. Um, and I hope that you've enjoyed it. Johnny DL out.